We're going to be looking at Genesis 23 and 24. In order to make sense of this passage, we need to do a little bit of backstory. In Genesis 12, we are introduced to a man named Abram, later renamed Abraham, and God makes a promise to him. God says to Abram, "I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing." And then God reiterates this promise in Genesis 15. But then a couple chapters later, he reiterates it again in Genesis 18, saying, "I know that your offspring will be very numerous. They will be like the stars in the sky, too many to count. Your offspring will take possession of other peoples as numerous as the grains of dust on the ground, and your offspring will become nations and kings and priests." So Abraham is thinking, great, awesome, this is what I've been waiting for. But there's one small problem. Abraham and his wife Sarah are old. Sarah is barren. There's no way that they could ever have children. So they decide to go ahead and just take matters into their own hands, and they choose a servant girl named Hagar to bear Abraham's child. And that child, as we read in our last video, was named Ishmael. God says to Abraham, now Abraham and Sarah were okay with this. Even in this passage, Sarah is 90 years old, and Abraham is about 99. So let's read. Genesis 21, verse 1. Now the Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. And Sarah conceived and bore a son to Abraham at his old age, just as God had said. It doesn't say that Abraham was as old as when he was in Genesis 17, where God first promised him a son, but it implies it. Like if he's still super old, it means that it's still really far from when he was 75. Either way, this is amazing news. Finally, after all these years, Sarah is going to have a son. Verse 6. When the boy was weaned, Sarah said, "Cast out the servant girl Hagar and her son Ishmael, for the son of the promise cannot be heir alongside my son Isaac." Notice that it doesn't say anything about Abraham being upset about this. He goes along with it. Verse 7. And the matter distressed her greatly, and she argued with God. And he said, "What are you arguing about before me? Speak to me, and I will do what you ask." She argues with God and asks him to spare Ishmael's life. And God says to her, "No, Ishmael shall not be cut off, but I will bless him and will make him a multitude of nations." And Sarah heard the voice of the Lord and understood, so she did not argue any further. Now, there's a lot going on here. First of all, Sarah shows a lack of faith by thinking that Isaac can't be an heir unless Ishmael is gone. If Sarah would have looked back at all the times that God has intervened in history, if she would have remembered when God made a covenant with Abraham, when God provided the sacrifice instead of Isaac, when God rained down judgment on Sodom and Gomorrah, if Sarah would have remembered all these times that God went against all odds to accomplish what he said he would do, she wouldn't be so quick to doubt him here. Secondly, God honors Abraham's original request to leave the decision up to him. Remember in Genesis 18, God asked Abraham 3 times, "Are the men of Sodom and Gomorrah destroyed?" And each time Abraham pleaded on behalf of the cities, and eventually God relented. Similarly here, Sarah says, "Okay, get rid of Ishmael." But then she asks God to reconsider. And God says, "You know what? I'm going to honor Abraham's request here and keep Ishmael alive and make him a multitude of nations." And God keeps his word. So God kept his promise to Abraham. And I think this story helps us remember 2 things. Number 1, God always does what he says he'll do. And number 2, sometimes God chooses to go against our expectations because he knows what is best. Okay, that's all I got. See you next time.